Global Field Operations, Jason Maynard. Hi, Jason. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, guys. It's amazing.
It's a little weird to be sitting here. I can remember my first SuiteWorld, 2018.
Yep.
We had a media center, and it was a little box. And now look at
It's all we could afford. A very small box.
And now look at where we are. It's
and
pretty
Fritz
crazy.
filmed you with his iPhone.
Yeah, basically.
Which was a little awkward.
It's the iPhone 3 too.
Yeah.
He still owns that.
You guys have come a long way.
I know.
I wasn't going to come back after that one. I was like, the production value, but this is quite spectacular.
Yeah, I'm glad you got to see our glow up here.
Yeah.
Now, one of the most exciting aspects of SuiteWorld, obviously, is connecting with our customers. How would you characterize some of the memorable conversations and experiences you have in connecting with our customers here at SuiteWorld?
Well, first, it's just great to finally see people in person. My days in the digital world feel like they'll never end. So it's actually great to see people. Although when you walk around and everybody has the mask on, you can't really tell who they are. So it's fun to actually talk with folks and see what they're doing and see how they're, what they're feeling, how their business is doing. So some of it right now is just connecting at a human level that we haven't been able to do for 19 months or whatever. So that's probably the best thing right now, is just to be able to say hello and give somebody a hug.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, it feels good.
I'm sorry for a sappy answer, but
no, I feel the same way. We were just talking about this. Feel the same exact way.
Yeah.
It's great.
But we're going to pin you down on this customer thing.
Okay.
We have a lot of entrepreneurs here, people who run operations, but one of the big focuses for us here at NetSuite is obviously the finance function, the CFO, the office of the CFO. And a lot of ink gets spilled about the evolving role of the CFO. How has it evolved in your mind?
I think CFOs today have to become more operational. The old days of the CFO just being the bean counter, tracking what's happening in the business, I think are long gone. I think NetSuite CFOs in particular, because they're growing businesses, they tend to have their hands in everything. We have a famous saying, if you don't know your numbers, you don't know your business, right? You may have heard that once or twice.
I feel like Kevin O'Leary also has that.
He does. It was like perfect. It's almost like we paid him to be here.
Yeah, I know, right?
It's crazy, but I think he would say that anyway. So, no, I think CFOs in general are becoming more operational. They have to be the caretaker of the business model. They have to be, if you will, the guide to keep the organization aligned, and obviously finances are a key part of that.
And the CEO and the CFO have seen each other a lot in these past 18 months. Maybe not in person, but in some way. Has that relationship kind of changed forever? And if so, what impact does that have on the finance function?
I think the pandemic brought, in a lot of ways, this operational change to the forefront. And so when the pandemic hit, every CEO was freaking out about expenses and costs, right? Obviously there were health concerns, but from a business standpoint, it's like, oh my gosh. And so I think what you saw was, if you were a decentralized organization with a lot of budget responsibility in the field or within individual business units, the CEO wanted to get visibility and some control around that. And so there was, I think, a sort of inherent pull towards re-centralization of the finance function and, if you will, the planning and forecasting. Because if you rewind the clock to March, April, May, there was a lot of chaos. People didn't know what was going to happen. And so that, I think, was a forcing function to get the two, not that they weren't aligned before, but even more aligned on that picture of what's happening inside the organization.
And I imagine that's kind of changed forever. And if that's true, what about the relationship between the CFO and the Chief Revenue Officer?
So I think there's a framework that happens in most businesses, which is you have your strategy, call it what do we do? You have your operations in terms of how we do it, and then financials in terms of how we fund it. And so CEO, CFO, head of revenue, head of sales, if you're a manufacturing company, it'll be your operations people. All of that, I think, is more aligned than ever. Forget about NetSuite for a second. You've got to get a decision around how you're going to work as an organization and how you're going to make those key choices. And then the technology obviously can enable you to do it. But I think you've seen that strategy, operations, finance, sort of those discipline areas become almost like one. And you're going to change, you're going to have things that are going to go right, things that are going to go wrong, but keeping that in alignment and keeping your organization focused on, what are the 2-3 main things that we have to do has sort of become, I think, the best practice coming out of the pandemic.
Because they weren't just misaligned sometimes, they were not even talking to each other.
Yeah. It's never intentional misalignment. It's just, running a business got in the way of running your business, right? How do you focus? How do you stay on task? How do you keep, the main thing, but you got to do it with numbers, right? You got to do it with data. You got to be able to make decisions that are not just emotion or gut based. There's still an element of that in business, but ultimately, you want to be operating off of a clean set of metrics so that you make the right choices.
Right.
Now, data, metrics, measurements in general, these have always been part of the lexicon of business and of CFOs, but is there a heightened importance around metrics right now?
I think so. I think we've moved into an era where you can track almost anything.
Yeah.
We've got multiple channels of, revenue happening, whether it's online or in person or, businesses that have moved fairly virtual. So a lot of the activities, because you're in software, you can actually generate data off of them, right? And so I think there's whole new categories of software that have emerged around being able to track that information. And so the challenge I think a lot of organizations have is, okay, we've got all this data. How do we actually make sense of it? How do we, parse, if you will, the signal from the noise? And I think that is sort of where, hopefully we can help folks. But that's kind of the hard part now is we got too much information. How do you not get distracted or look at the wrong thing?
Yeah.
And you talked about the linkage between strategic, financial, and operational plans. What are the full organizational consequences looking like when this starts coming together and those silos start coming down?
Yeah, I think a lot of companies might have had pieces of finance living in other functional units, whether it's manufacturing or sales or marketing. I would argue the best practice today is to have a fairly strong central FP&A organization with clear linkage and alignment to, call it sort of the quasi-finance functions in every operating unit that you might have. Even HR, you're going to want to obviously track things there. So it's a little bit of a I would say sort of a pull back to a stronger operational CFO, but with increased visibility into the day-to-day metrics. So you can have a stand-up meeting in manufacturing and look at where your inventory is, but make sure that's the same data that the CFO has and you're not working off of two sets of books.
Right.
Yeah, and I wanted to switch topics a little bit to talk about something that Evan said in his keynote about the frothiness of the markets. A lot of IPOs, a lot of venture money, a lot of private equity money. But how startups are valued has also changed a bit. Growth without the promise of some sort of profit somewhere down the line is sort of a non-starter, or at least, will get you some hard questions. So, how has the relationship between CFOs and other executives changed in light of that?
Well, I would say startups should never raise money that they don't have a very good place to spend it.
It sounds obvious now when you say it like that.
Taking on expense because you raise money is not what I would think of as a viable long-term strategy. But access to capital has been easier, than ever. It's kind of counterintuitive coming out of the last year or two.
Sure.
But it's quite easy for great businesses to raise money. I think at the end of the day, you've got to separate your ability to raise capital versus your need to deploy it. I would say many companies, if you go back to that framework of your strategy, your ops, and your finance and raising capital, thinking through how you ladder or sequence your growth. There's got to be an order of operation in terms of how you expand. So if you're a software company, you may not want to raise a bunch of money and then expand to 17 countries all at once, because you might screw it up. Maybe you pick a couple. Maybe you pick a couple where you have English speaking if you're based in the US, and you start there. So I think there's an order of operations and not letting the capital strategy dictate your operations.
It's so tough with all that money out there.
Yeah. Well, and I think what you're seeing also is interest rates are at fairly historic lows. Now, there's been a little bit of an uptake in rates in the last couple months, but it hasn't changed, if you will, the kind of the venture or private equity involvement in tech companies or really any sort of modern businesses. So I think we may be in this landscape for a little while longer, and it's not a bad thing if you're trying to grow a business that you get access to capital.
Sure. And how has the notion of unit economics changed post-pandemic compared to 2019?
I think, Kevin O'Leary on stage, I think, said this, which is understanding your customer acquisition costs relative to your long-term customer or value of your customer. I mean, if you're not paying attention to those, you're in trouble. A lot of companies get out over their skis in terms of spending too much on customer acquisition and not understanding the impact that churn and attrition or whatever those sort of downsell characteristics are on your long-term value. I do think that because of so many structural changes that have happened in the last 18 months, and we heard it today with Kevin on stage around direct-to-consumer business models, you can't really operate a DTC model without understanding LTV, lifetime value of customer to your customer acquisition cost ratio. So it's kind of how you do it. But I think it's probably brought that to many traditional businesses that perhaps didn't look at it that way before.
Sure.
Yeah, and speaking of the last 18 months, supply chains, workforce, and fulfillment and delivery are all highly uncertain right now.
Yep.
Does that make unit economics more unknowable?
Pretty tricky, I think so.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think it's, there's been this phrase, we've moved from a just-in-time to a just-in-case type of supply chain model. If I had to forecast or predict, I don't think this is going to get sorted out quickly in the short term. I think there's a lot of structural challenges that are going to take years to unwind. We're seeing more companies reshore, trying to think about how do you eliminate some of these, latent issues in your supply chain. I mean, you obviously don't want to have your products sitting off of Long Beach right now.
Or Santa Monica.
Or Santa Monica.
I see it every day.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a boat show outside there in the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
So I think there's some structural stuff that's going to take a while to get remedied, and it puts a lot of pressure on companies who don't have the inventory to sell.
Right.
So it's but it's all throughout. I mean, you look at semiconductors, you look at the ability to get that into cars. Very difficult to get access to that. So we're seeing it kind of in all sorts of industries.
Yeah.
We made a bunch of announcements today on stage, and we're going to talk about that with others here throughout today and tomorrow. But I wanted to get your thought on the customer benefit. So let's start with Suite Banking. I actually heard some applause in the audience just at the very beginning.
It wasn't just me. So it was just me.
Oh, I thought maybe.
No,
That was all the other nerds too.
Yeah, exactly. So Suite Banking, I'm beyond excited that we've expanded the ERP category to incorporate what I would call a lot of fintech solutions. So there's been so much innovation in fintech in the last 3-4 years. Things like AP automation, AR automation, working capital, international, payments. All of those things have been, frankly, point products surrounding ERP systems. We took not so surprisingly, a suite approach to this and said, let's solve this through kind of a unified suite under the umbrella of Suite Banking. And I think what it's going to do for our customers, to directly answer the question, is it's going to save them time and money, right? You're going to be able to save time from a labor standpoint where you don't have to manually enter in things 27 times. It's going to save you money because it's all going to be part of the suite. And so you can eliminate multiple software applications, point products that you won't need. And so I think our customers are going to benefit greatly. So I'm beyond excited that we brought it all together. We're working with a great partner, HSBC, which I think will be up here later. They're helping power us. And then we're going to bring on more financial services companies, both some other banks, but as well as some new innovators in fintech, maybe some crypto stuff.
Oh boy.
Jason Laser Eyes. We'll have the whole thing going on soon. So I don't want to get ahead of myself
We're
too
going to
much.
sell NetSuite as an NFT.
Yeah. Something's happening. Or Sweet Stanley.
That's SuiteWorld 22. So thanks. You've totally blown it.
Pre-announcing.
Yeah. NFT World.
What about NetSuite Analytics Warehouse?
Going back to what we talked about, we finally have a purpose-built NetSuite data warehouse on the world's greatest database technology. So I think customers are going to love it. Pre-built for NetSuite. It's going to make it a lot easier, more accessible to kind of what I call small, mid-sized, fast-growing companies, lower the barrier to adoption. It's priced super aggressively. I think we got plenty to sell. We actually have inventory of all that to sell. We have no inventory shortages to actually make available to folks. And
Yeah, I think you should say that directly to camera.
yeah, we have plenty of inventory of all of our products to sell to you. So, but no, it's good. I think I think customers have been asking for it, and one of the benefits of being part of Oracle is that we can now leverage all the great work on the Oracle database team, and then put a NetSuite spin on it. So I think it's going to be fantastic.
And last but not least, ACS. And I do want to mention, I thought Evan did a much improved version of your great version of Crazy Dealing Days there.
I was like, wait, this isn't usually Evan.
He's got a future selling used cars.
Right?
I don't care what anybody says. That guy, we get him on the lot, he's going to move some units.
Yeah, for
No
sure.
doubt.
We might actually, and I know this was on the script, right? No? We're actually going to put him out here, he doesn't know this yet, on the floor, and we're going to give him a quota. And if he wants to go to the gala, he's got to sell a certain number of ACS units to actually qualify for the
Well,
gala.
the rumor was he was going to have one of those twirly signs.
Yeah, oh yeah.
That's
Well,
amazing.
Yeah, we'll put him out on the corner of Kuval if we have to. So I know there's a lot we can do.
I forget what I was asking.
After that showing, there's so much.
Right, it's
so much untapped potential.
Yeah.
It's incredible what we're going to be able to do.
Yeah.
You were asking about ACS playbooks.
Oh, ACS
Yeah.
playbooks. Yeah.
I always have to reel it back in with you two, and
In
especially
all
you.
seriousness, our ACS team's been at it for 5 years. They have been solving all sorts of problems. The great news is they went back in and did sort of kind of an interesting inventory analysis of what do customers most frequently ask for. And it was interesting is they kind of packaged them up into functional areas. So things that benefit financial automation, or how do you do better in HR. So they created some functional areas. They also created some cross-functional, so procure to pay, quote to cash, some things that span multiple departments.
Right.
Some industry solutions, scaling your technology, and obviously helping companies go public, and sort of the checklist of, call it governance and risk related to financials. So it's all stuff they've been doing, but I would say they've really documented it well, and hopefully that means customers can move faster and be more agile. So I'm super excited. The ACS team, smartest people, there's like a genius bar. They literally are the NetSuite geniuses.
I
So,
like that. I like that.
That's great.
Yeah.
So I'm going to bring this full circle
All
here, back to the CFO. So say you are 18 or 19, heading into college. Hopefully USC's Marshall School of Business, fight
Sure.
on for all of you who are tuning in. There are lots of tracks to take: marketing, operations, finance, business analytics, HR, and so on. Where should that 18 or 19-year-old head?
I mean, literally, we're at SuiteWorld. I mean, if I don't say, is there any other answer besides accounting?
Yeah.
Really?
You can't
Right.
lose.
You can't lose.
Can't
You can't
lose.
lose.
Yeah.
I mean, you could be, part of the NetSuite ecosystem with your shiny degree in accounting, maybe finance too, but
Yeah.
I mean, you gotta love the accountants. So I'd say go accounting.
Yeah.
Sexy field.
We're all in on
It's
it.
all.
Yeah.
It's the foundation of what we do here. So
Love it. Love it.
All right, well, we're kind of at the end, but we stole this little segment from Jimmy Fallon called Mad Libs Theater,
okay.
and we're going to act it out, actually, at the end of the day. I don't know
Not
if
with you, don't worry.
Yeah. We might need Evan, though. But we need your help.
Okay.
We need a verb and the name of a famous person.
A verb and the name of a famous person.
Yes.
How about, since we're at SuiteWorld, how about to sweeten?
Ooh,
Sweet.
love it.
Sweeten. And a famous person, how about the guy who founded the whole thing?
Oh,
Evan Goldberg.
that's great.
I'm clearly angling to get like a better love sack in my office, right?
You don't have enough?
I get an extra one thrown in there, so
This is great.
hopefully that'll help.
That's
Put a
great.
good word in for me.
And
on
you'll
that one.
get the one with the stealth tech, the speakers
Oh yeah,
inside
absolutely.
the love set.
I already asked him about that. So
Great,
They're
great.
they're in stock.
Love
Buy
it.
your
Well,
love sack today.
Yeah.
Lovesack.com.
Wow, he's selling everything.
I want to see if I can get that twirling job, or maybe
Yeah, ACS, love sack,
see if I
let's
qualify.
go.
So that you can go to the gala, too.
Look, everybody's got a quota here, so I'll sign up.
Jason, thank you so much for joining us. This was awesome. And right after this short break, we'll be